Hello, happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Alyssa Thomas from Penguin and Fish, where we make lovely and quirky hand embroidery patterns and kits. I'm here every night at 9:30 p.m. Central, and we just chill and relax and craft. And I encourage you to join me and do that with me. Okay, guys, tonight we are going to start a short little series of embroidery videos. I'll be doing 3 how-to videos over the next 3 evenings, kind of to prep us for the I Love Home block of the month quilt along by Jaquelynne Steves that's coming up on Monday, and also for my Craft a Happy Life kit stitch along. That'll be coming right after our first block from the block of the month is done. So a little embroidery lessons to get us going. I want you guys to try and embrace embroidery if you haven't done it before, or if there's just something you're not quite sure about, let me know in the comments here and we will figure it out. So tonight we are going to learn how to make perfect, nice, even stitches. So we're gonna go from something maybe a little less perfect to something a little more even and lovely. I'll show you up close when we start here. And I'm also going to show you how I like starting and ending my floss so that I have no, this is the back now, so I have no knots and everything is just tucked in, and I won't accidentally grab onto a knot by accident, and I won't have like a tangled mess back here. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. And we will also be doing an opening of my Craft a Happy Life kit. So here we are, and here's the back of it. I'm gonna open this up and show you guys what's in it. They are on sale starting today. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, I know a lot of you have got yours already. It's gonna be on sale for 20% off, and that's already in the listing price. 20% off for the next 4 days, so through Saturday. So if you wanted to stitch this along with us and you wanted it at a discount, next 4 days would be a good time to get it. And there's a link for both a link to the kit and a link to the Jaquelynne Steves Block of the Month, I Love Home Block of the Month Stitch Along. That's free to sign up, and then after you sign up, she'll show you the fabric requirements and all that. So those are our next 2 projects. Monday we start the block of the month, and since it's a block of the month, you know, we'll only be getting just the first block, right? So I don't think that'll take the whole month. So when we're done with that, that's when we'll be starting the Craft a Happy Life stitch along. And this will be a week project tops, just a couple days, but we'll take it slow and play around with it a little bit. So that's the plan, guys. I'm gonna flip you around and we will get going. I will show you what's in the kit first. So here we go. Thanks for joining me, guys. Nice seeing you. Okay, here we are. So just again to share with you, here's what I'm talking about. So if your embroidery, when you're stitching, it kind of ends up looking like this a little bit, that's what we're gonna address tonight. You know, they're not perfectly lined up. They're not perfectly straight. They're not all on the line, all that nice, versus this row where every stitch is just about the exact same width and everything is just nice and clean, perfect on the line there. So that is the plan for tonight. But to start things off, I wanted to share the embroidery kit. Here it is, the Craft a Happy Life embroidery kit. This is actual size. So we will be starting this, like I said, after we do the first block from the Jaquelynne Steves I Love Home Block of the Month Club. So, all right, I wanted to show you what's in it, just so you know what to expect. Again, the sale for this is tonight. You placed your order for the kit today. Awesome. Oh, you got the jellyfish kit too. Oh, yes, so I have a bunch of other little animals and stuff too. Jellyfish, we should do that one as a stitch along sometime, Christine, I think. That'd be fun because the jellyfish has a lot of French knots and stuff. That might be a fun thing to do here. So, all right, I took it out of the bag, and inside we have a 4-inch wooden hoop, a cute little ribbon to decorate when we're done. So this will get tied into a bow once we kind of make everything. And we got thread, we got lots and lots of this gold and blue thread. There should be enough. If you split your thread into 3 strands, which we'll talk about tomorrow night, you should have more than enough to make a couple of these really. But if you don't split your threads and you use all 6 strands from the floss, you should still have enough thread. And you know, these 2 colors, that gold and the blue. And we have a little piece of white muslin fabric. So here we go. It's really pretty and soft. And a little embroidery needle. This is a size 5 embroidery needle. There we are. Just if you're curious on sizes. And then we have the iron-on transfer. So that's in reverse because when you iron it on, you're actually, you know, placing it this way on the fabric. So when you put the iron on, it'll leave the design on the fabric. So, you know, it needs to be in reverse. So we will go over how to do this during the stitch along, and then also a traceable pattern too, because this will be good for, you know, 3 to 5 irons. And then, you know, if you still want to stitch it, then you're going to want the normal pattern too, so you can trace it if you like. And then we have the how-to instructions and the little, you know, the color and stitch guide here with the stitches. And we will go over all of these stitches before we get started on this project. So here's the deal. Tonight, again, we're going to go over the neat and even stitches. Tomorrow, we are going to look at the different thicknesses of floss. So floss comes with 6 strands. And I often get asked, how many strands do I use? And we're going to go over that. So we're going to see what every strand looks like what does 1 versus 3 versus 6 strands look like. And also we're going to look at some other things like if you use an Aurifil 12 weight thread or something else, what would that look like? Or 2 strands of it. And even some yarn, like what that would look like too. So that's the plan for tomorrow. And then Friday, we will look at all the different stitches that are in the Craft a Happy Life kit and the Jaquelynne Steves I Love Home. So we'll learn all those stitches before we get started. And maybe a few other ones. So that's the plan for Friday. So tonight, we are going to look at the neat and even stitches. So first of all, I am getting my fabric into the hoop. So I put the inner hoop behind, and then I just really loosened the dial here, the closure, putting it over the top. I always tighten it a hair, just so it feels like it's holding the fabric and it's not super loose. And then I kind of pull the fabric taut all the way around. I'm not really stretching the fabric, I'm just kind of getting it all even, because you know you don't want like these bloops in, and you should be able to feel it. Like if you rub your finger around it, you can see the little uneven bloops, and you might need to tighten it a little bit more. I need to do that because I'm just pulling it out the other side. So I hope you all are doing well tonight. I missed you guys yesterday. It was my husband's birthday yesterday, and we hung out at the park and rode bike and ate yummy food. It was awesome. It was a good birthday. For me, at least. I think he had a good time, too. So, all right. There we are. We have the fabric in the hoop. We are ready to go. So I have my thread here. I already have it thread in the needle. We'll go over a little bit more in detail getting started when we look at the different stitches. But here's how I always like to start. So especially if you have a blank piece of fabric, you know, you don't have anything here to weave in the stitches or anything like that. What I always do is start out with something called an away knot. And here's how to do it. So first of all, I'm going to tie a tiny knot. Well, just a knot. It happens to be tiny. Oh, I will tell him, Christine. Thanks. Oh, yes, family comes first. So there we go. Tied a little knot in there. And now, you know, normally what you'd think is you'd come up from the back and start stitching. and you just have this knot on the back. But if you do that, then you have like all these little hairs hanging out on the back, and that can easily, when your thread rubs up against that, they can pull through to the front, which is kind of super duper annoying. So here's what I do instead. It's the away knot. I did not put any interfacing on the back of this. We can talk about that a little bit. Maybe I'll try doing that. I don't usually do that. Interfacing would just make the whole thing a little more sturdy. Maybe we'll try that for the I Love Home project, but I don't think we really need it. So, all right, here are a few lines that I drew on here. First of all, you gotta decide where you're gonna start. And I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna work on this line first. So here is gonna be my starting point. So I wanna find a spot about 4 inches away from that starting point, but that does not cross a bunch of my other lines that I might be stitching. So I'm gonna go about right here. And I'm gonna go right in the front of my fabric, not the back. I'm gonna pull my floss through. So there we go. That's the little knot that we did. So for the time being, I'm gonna forget about this, all right? So this is how I start. It's called an away knot, and you're gonna realize how nice this is once we get to the end of the floss here, or once we finish up. So this is how we start. I am going to now, we're gonna start stitching this row. So let's talk about neat and even stitches. You know, I'm gonna come up here right away to kind of finish off the away knot. So here we go. I'm coming up right at the beginning of the row here, and look, I have this big long line here behind me. But we're gonna forget about that for the time being and just work on our stitches. So here's what I'm talking about with the stitches. A lot of times when you're stitching, I mean, I maybe exaggerated this a little bit, but you might find that you don't have the exact, you know, you're not coming up in the exact spot. You have a little thread there, or they're not quite lining up, or they're different lengths. You know, you might have a long one or a shorter stitch here. They might cross over. You might just be having trouble getting nice and even stitches. So instead, what we want, you know, in theory, to get cleaner stitches is something like this. So here's kind of the difference. So what I find makes the big difference is you kind of divide it into two things. There's neat and there's even. So we're going to start with neat. And what I mean by neat is that you don't have these little spaces. Everything's straight on the row. And with even, I mean stitches that are the same stitch length. So we're going to start with neat. So there are two ways to stitch. One is called the sewing method, and the other is the stabbing method. And I find that the sewing method, you get more uneven stitches like that. So here's the sewing method. In the sewing method, you put your stitch in, and I'm going to do a back stitch here. And I'm coming up right away with the needle a stitch length away. So then I'm going to pull that through. And I'm going to try and go in the same hole here, and I'm going to come up a stitch length away. And I'm going to just make a few more stitches here. Try and go in the same hole. But the sewing method, I am going in and out at the same time. So let's take a look at that for a sec. So yeah, I was trying to do this good, and I still have, you know, I have this little space here. We have a little fabric loop, or not fabric, a little thread popping out. This one looks pretty good. That one I got in the same hole, but this one I obviously didn't, and it got a lot shorter here. So the reason I think that's happening with the sewing method is because you're coming in at an angle like this. And when you're coming in at an angle, it's really difficult to get right in that exact hole that you came out of here, right? Because you have to go over your last stitch, and you're kind of grazing the stitch, and even, you know, the best that you can. See there, I still missed the hole. Yeah, see, I'm not even. This one's kind of ending up right here, and then I went up a couple threads and we're right there. So I think it's all about the fact that you have to go in at an angle, and that's why I'm getting kind of these uneven stitches with the sewing method, and it's even difficult to judge distance. So I'm going in there and I'm coming back out, but it's hard for me to tell if this is the exact stitch length as this. So I think I got close, but I'm just gonna bring this all the way to the back and we'll see. But yeah, so this stitch ended up maybe being a hair less than this one. So the alternative, which I like using, is called the stabbing method. So let's just so you guys can know, this is the sewing method. This whole column I'll do sewing method. Sewing method, and this will be stabbing. Okay, so I'm going to come back up on this side and we will do the stabbing method. And here's why I like it. So let's do a few stitches. Now in the stabbing method, I am not going in and out at the same time. I am going straight down, pulling my thread all the way to the back, and then coming up. And I'm dragging my needle across the back so I can kind of see exactly where I'll come up. I can judge how far away from the last stitch. So there I determined maybe a thread or two over. There, that looks about the same length. I'm going to pull that back up. And now since I'm going vertically down, I'm not going at an angle like this. I'm going vertically down with my needle. I can get in that exact hole that my last stitch came out of. So like that. There, those are two good looking stitches right after each other. So let's just drag the needle again to find a good starting point. I can maybe go a little bit more on that line, so just go back out and get the right spot. Pull all the way out and then stab straight down into that exact same hole again. So we'll do a few more. About right there. And you can see I'm dragging my needle on the back every single time. Ooh, we got a little knot here. There we go. Let's do a few more and then we'll take a look. So you might notice this goes a little slower. And it's true because I have to do a whole nother motion. I have to go all the way out and then all the way back in. But I kind of like being able to have the neat, perfect stitches over going a hair faster. So this is my preferred method. But, you know, feel free to try both of these ways out and see what you like best. There are some times when the sewing method works great, and I'll show you those in a sec here. So let's first take a look at. We'll just stop there. So here you go. Here are our nice clean stitches. This is from the stabbing method, and this again, most likely, I mean the biggest thing to know is that you're going straight down like this versus these, which are going in kind of more horizontal. So give those a try. Again, here's the sewing method. I find that it doesn't give you as neat stitches, neat or even stitches as the stabbing method. But, you know, you might like this speed a little bit better. You find that you get more tangles in the back if you're not careful though. All right, I have a little tip for that. So I keep an active left hand. So I'm holding my, you know, because I'm right-handed, so I'm holding it with my left hand, the hoop. When I'm stitching, I always have my fingers in the floss behind here. Like I'm always touching the floss kind of where it comes into the, from the fabric here. So let's do another stitch. So here's another thing. To do the stitch, you know, I'm going to be going on the back here. Can't bend that way. So I'm actually taking my left hand and I'm moving the thread out of the way a little bit. So I have this nice taut area versus not even knowing what's back there. You know, I might have something that looks like this. So if I stitch through that, you know, I'm going to grab something, right? So by having the left hand on the back, I can always feel what's going on there. So when I start a stitch, I kind of pull the thread out of the way with my left hand, and then I can do the stitch. And then my hand is still active here. I'm feeling the thread go through my fingers, and I will be able to tell instantly if there is a knot or a tangle because I will feel it go by my fingers here, you know, all the way till it's done, the stitch is done. So if you have an active left hand back here, that will help a lot if you're getting tangles or little loopy knots. And if we get one of those loopy knots tonight, I'll show you an easy way to get them out. But active left hand, that's you know, a really big help for knowing what's happening back here and not getting a pile of knots. So all right, let's finish this stitch off. I do want to show you a couple. I almost exclusively do the stabbing method. But there are some times that I do the sewing method, and that's with certain stitches. So for example, I'm going to do a running stitch, and you know what? I think I'm going to do it over here so it's in the sewing section area instead of the stabbing. So for a running stitch is a bunch of little dashed lines. So you have to go, you make your stitch, and then with the sewing method, you can come out right away. So that's your first stitch. And now, instead of going back, like a back stitch, we're gonna keep going forward. So just in and out again, and in and out again. So with the sewing method, that is a really quick deal. It might still be accurate, more accurate, using the stabbing method because you can really measure your stitches a little bit better because you're going slower and you're dragging the needle behind. Like here's, you know, you could go in and then you'd be really careful to get the exact same length in the middle if you wanted. Get a little fuzzle out of the way. Oops, lost my needle. So let's do that again. I can drag, I think I need to go out a little farther. There we go. I can get the same distance between there. So the stabbing method is still nice. But one thing that you can do with the sewing method that you can't do with the stabbing method, and I think I'm going to go just right next to the stitches here. For a running stitch, you can go in and out a few times. If you're on a straight line, you can go in and out a couple times and get a few stitches done at once. So that's something you definitely cannot do using the stabbing method. So that's a one reason I might choose the sewing method. But look, even here, I made that a whole lot wider than that. So I do still like the stabbing method, even with the running stitch, but it is kind of cool that you can do it all at once right away. Another stitch that I like using the sewing method instead is the chain stitch. So here is, we'll flip around again, just so we stay on the sewing side here. All right, getting a little loose, let's tighten it up here. So chain stitch, you're going in the exact same hole and then coming up again, but you want to come out in the loop that you made. So like that, and then your thread captures that loop, just like that. So if we do that again, we go in and out right away using the sewing method. We're inside the loop. And there we go. And then we can just put a little stitch right on the other side to end it. So with the stabbing method, that becomes a little bit more difficult. I'm going to go this way again for the stabbing method. So if I go right back into the hole, so it's trying to pull the thread behind me because I'm going in the same hole and then coming up. Now I have to kind of wrangle this and, you know, wrap it around. Whereas the sewing method, I didn't really have to do that. So again, I'm going in the same hole, then out. See, like, look at this. I got to figure out how to get that wrapped around. So that is why I kind of like the sewing method a little bit better than the stabbing method for the chain stitch. So, all right, that is the stabbing method versus the sewing method. So the next thing I want to look at is getting even stitches. So this is, you know, the stabbing method was my way to get cleaner stitches versus the sewing method, which is not so clean, not as clean, at least for me. If you're super practiced in the sewing method, I'm sure you could get perfect stitches as well. But if you're just starting, I think go with the stabbing method if you're worried about having neat stitches. If you're not worried, that's perfectly fine too. It's still gonna look great, whatever you do. It'll still be a fun embroidery. But all right, so next up, how to get the even stitches. So this one, you know, some stitches were shorter, some were longer. How do we get them all to be even? I like thinking about it as tunnel vision and looking at the whole, or also just kind of having a detail look and then like a bird's eye view look. So I'll show you kind of what I mean. So we'll start stitching here. I'm going to go back to doing the back stitch. And we'll do just a few stitches. I'll do the stabbing method. And we might just be stitching along, doing our little stitches, and having fun with that. And we keep going, and we may find that we are, you know, as we're looking close, we're kind of comparing the two stitches to each other. But over a period of time, you might realize, oh, I am getting bigger and bigger stitches here. How did that happen? So here you can see this stitch over here is a little bit bigger than when we started right here, right? So we don't want that to happen, as, you know, I mean, you know, it's fine. But if you're going for the nice and even stitches, here's what I like doing. First of all, I do like having a little bit of that tunnel vision where I am just looking at the previous stitch. So let's start again over here. Oops, so here, I got one of those knots in here, guys. That just happened because my thread wrapped around another piece of thread. I can just pull up on the loop and sometimes it helps out. And that one was really easy. I'll show you that again later if we get another one. But all right, you start with your first stitch. And I like my stitches to be, you know, a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, but you can do whatever size you like. So here's what I'm doing. I am actively looking at my previous stitch right here. And I'm going to drag my needle on the back, and I am going to go right to where I think that space is the same as what that stitch is going to be. And when I think I got it, then I will make the stitch. So that looks pretty good, right? So I'm going to keep doing the same thing. I'm going to look at that previous stitch and then drag the needle and just eyeball what looks like that previous stitch, that width. So that's the sort of tunnel vision. But if you are only looking in the tunnel vision, that's when things like this happen, where you think you're the same, but then it starts to get bigger and bigger, or it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So what you have to do is you have to actively be looking. You have to be actively going from your tunnel vision world and then looking at the bird's eye view. So I do like maybe 2 or 3 stitches like this. And then I will look at the hole. So like, let's say, you know, we start to get even bigger and bigger and bigger, which is kind of looking like I'm getting. So let's say this is our next stitch. So here, definitely. Now I can look at a bird's eye view of it every couple stitches, and I can notice, oh, hey, my current stitches are a hair bit bigger than my first stitches. So what you want to do is kind of average it out. So this is close to my first stitch. My last stitch is here. Let's go a hair smaller on my next stitch. So you see, I'm not going quite as big. It's pretty close, but I'm not going quite as big as my last stitch. And I'm going to gradually make my stitches smaller again. So I'll do a couple more stitches looking at the tunnel vision, just looking right at my last stitch, and then again looking at the hole, backing up and looking at all of them to compare all of the stitches together. And you can see now I'm back to closer to where I started. If I kept going tunnel vision, I'd get bigger and bigger, and I'd have more stitches like this, kind of like how I started small here and then got bigger there. So it's a matter of actively looking. There are a few tricks that you can do if you're worried about that, about not getting that perfect. While you're practicing, you're active looking. Oh, Wisconsin! I'm from Wisconsin. Nice to see everyone popping in here tonight. So, all right, here is some tricks. If you didn't want to, or if you're just practicing your active looking, here I'm going to get a water-soluble marker out. You can actually draw with a little water-soluble pen or marker. You can actually draw the stitches out beforehand. You could even take a ruler to do this. So now I know I'm going to have my even stitches all the way across. Another thing you can do, I saw this on Molly Johansson's site, but look, you can even take a pen and draw your stitch length right on your finger like that. So when you're stitching, you can measure the length of stitches right away. So let's give that a try too. So here I'm going right on the dots. So that takes the guesswork out of your stitch length. And then let's try the little thing with the finger. So here we go. First stitch. So let's get our finger ruler right there. I'm in kind of a weird position for that. But there you go. And you can just go along the way like that. So that's kind of a funny way of doing it if you really want to be silly. There you go. Coming up at the next stitch. All right, let's get our finger out again. Ends right there. Right there. There, we got 3 cute little even stitches. So couple fun, silly things to try out. But yes, definitely the main idea though, if you just start practicing this, you'll get better and better at it, of the tunnel vision, looking right at the stitch you did before and really trying to make a similar size stitch. You know, and you can keep pulling the needle out and moving it around till it's just perfect. And then the other thing is, after you do a few of those tunnel vision stitches, to really look at the whole. Compare your last row. Are you getting bigger? Are you getting smaller? Are you about the same? And if you need to adjust, then adjust. Over the whole piece, as long as you're within the same range of stitch length, then you should be pretty good to go. Oh, the pen I was using, here you go, Carla. It is a water erasable fabric marking pen. I don't have a link in my my post right now, but I'll put a link to this afterwards if you're interested. So there we go. And you know, one other thing we could probably go over tonight is What do you do if you get to a corner? So let's just draw a corner here. You're stitching along and you come to a corner. So this is where we're going to put the, I'm going to start here and work my way towards that corner. Here's where we're going to put that measuring, our like eyeballing it in place. So you're cruising along. So let's say I've done this whole row and I'm approaching that point right there. So when I get to about here, I stop stitching and I take a look at the space here. So now I have to make a judgment call, right? So my stitches are about this size. How many stitches is it going to take me to get to that point? Well, I could divide it in half like this and have 2 stitches that are both maybe a little bit longer than my current stitches. Or another option is I could divide it into thirds. So here and here. Let's see what that looks like. I'm just going to draw it in with my water erasable marker again. So there's that option, which is maybe a hair smaller versus the, if we went up like that again, the half and half option, they're a little bit bigger. So once I approach a point, I'm always thinking, okay, I'm pretty close now. Should I divide it into thirds? Should I divide it into half? I mean, if I was stopped my stitching farther back here, I could decide, should I divide it in quarters here, or what's the right size? And then you just have to make a judgment call. And it might be like if my stitches are looking smaller compared to my whole other row that I'm working on, then maybe I'll go for this bigger stitch. But with just these 2 stitches here, I think this dividing into thirds might look a little bit better if all I have to go on are these 2 stitches. They will be a little smaller, but that'll be okay on the average. So the reason I am looking before I get there is because you don't want something like this to happen. So let's just draw another corner here. Grab my thread. So, all right, I'm just stitching along. I am not paying attention to that corner at all. And all of a sudden, I get to it. And then I'm like, oh, dang, that is way smaller of a stitch than all the rest of the stuff I've been doing. So by stopping earlier, you can assess. So here, my last 3 stitches look all equal, and that might be better than having all equal stitches up to the point and then having a super tiny stitch, right? So I like the idea of stopping early, assessing the space, deciding if you want to go into thirds or into halves, and then stitching to the end. So that's what I like doing with corners, and then you just start up on the next row. Bloop. And there we go. So that is my basic deal that I'm actively looking at this all while I stitch. Even today, I stitch all the time, but I am still actively making decisions. Should I do the sewing method or the stabbing method to get the neat stitches? And I am actively doing this every single time I stitch, stopping, dividing up the space in my head, and then stitching, and doing the active looking, like looking really close. What is my next tunnel vision stitch? And then actively going far away. It's always a back and forth. And even as someone who does this all the time, I am still actively thinking of all that. So that is the lesson for tonight, guys. Well, not quite yet. So that is the neat, clean, even stitches lesson. Next up, we still, remember this guy? We still have our away knot there. So this is how we started our thread. But let's finish up our thread here. So let's say I'm done with my stitching. What I do, instead of tying a knot here, I weave in the ends. Oh, thanks, Tammy. I appreciate it. And you guys, let me know if you have any questions about anything. I will be here again tomorrow, same time at 9:30 p.m. Central, and we will be going over the size of stitches you can get with different strands of thread. So I get asked a lot, how many strands of thread do I use? Right now I'm using 3 strands. The floss comes with 6 strands. We will look at what they all look like. What does 1 strand look like compared to 6 strands? And then we'll look at some other things too, like what does yarn look like? What does like Orfill 12 weight look like? And so we will be looking at that tomorrow. And then Friday we'll be going over some stitches. So I wove in the ends. I'll do it one more time. I just weave my needle into the backs of other stitches, and I try and grab as many threads as I go. And that really locks our thread in place. So that's not coming out. You can put this in the washing machine and be really aggressive with it. That is not, us weaving that back and forth is not coming out. Whereas with a knot, it could loosen up and come out. So that's why I like weaving the ends. Then you can cut right near the edge. So I have no thread hanging out, everything's secure. I'm not worried about this coming out at all, and I have nothing hanging out here like a knot or some other floss that I will catch my thread on later when I stitch. So, all right, that is how you end a piece of floss. Now back to where we started. We started with the away knot there. That's how we started this whole thing. But now we're done. I'm going to snip off that little knot. So I pulled it forward a little and I'm snipping off just the knot. There we go, our tiny, tiny little knot. And then, since there's no knot there, I have another little end. So I'm gonna grab my needle. Oh, here it is. Lost my needle. And you're gonna just put that little strand back onto the needle. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to weave in the ends. And I always weave in 3 times if I can, because that third little turn is kind of what locks it in place. So here's my second. And then one more time, we'll weave it in. Zoop. All right, and let's trim that. We don't want this little flange hanging out here. Snip. And there we go, a back where there's no knots. It'll be nice and super clean when you're done. It won't catch on anything as you stitch. And that's how I start and end in embroidery, or just when you're done with a piece of floss. So there we are, guys. I'm gonna flip you around and we will end it for the evening. Hello, thanks again for joining me, everyone. If you have any questions, you can let me know now. I'll hang out here for a little bit longer with you guys if you like. And again, just to remind you, the Craft a Happy Life kit, we will be starting this probably mid-August. It is on sale in my shop at penguinandfish.com. Through Saturday, it's 20% off, and then it will go up back to the normal price. There is a link in the post for the kit, and we will also be starting on Monday the I Love Home Block of the Month from Jaquelynne Steves. There is a link to sign up for that. It is free to sign up, and it's a kind of like a 4-month block of the month. There will be 4 total, and there's cute little houses that you can applique or embroider, and that's kind of we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. We might do embroidery for the block of the month and also for the Craft a Happy Life kit. So good time to learn some embroidery tips and tricks. Again, Thursday, tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Central, we will be going over what different strands of floss looks like how how many strands should you use and why, and we'll be doing that. And then Friday, we will be going over all the stitches that are in the I Love Home project and the Craft a Happy Life project, and whatever other stitch you would like to see, we'll play around with that as well, assuming I know the stitch. I like sticking to my basic stitches, so. Oh, you saw my kits at Joann's, Carla, that's awesome. Oh, yeah, so you guys, if you didn't want to wait, so I'll be shipping these in about 4 days from now, but if you want to go and stitch it like tomorrow, they are available already at Joann Fabrics. If you have the sewing or the stitching section at your Joann's, you'll be able to find it there. So awesome, guys. I hope that helped out a little bit. And if you have some questions after this, just write it down. I will be here tomorrow. Feel free to ask away in the comments. I will answer. And again, here again tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Central. The YouTube replay of this will go up in a couple hours. The YouTube show is at youtube.com/penguinandfishmovies. So you can find me there for the replay. Otherwise, it will also stay here on the Penguin and Fish Facebook page. So thanks again, guys. I will catch you tomorrow. Hope y'all have a great evening. Good night.